Welcome back to the Unstuck movement. I am your host, Rob Z. These are true testimonies of breakthrough from incredible leaders in our society. Today, I brought on the powerful Dr. John Page. John, really honored to have you here. Today, we're going to be talking relationships, faith, trust, communication, and I love to dive into things right off the bat with a powerful question. And I'm curious from yourself, what would you say as far as one truth about relationships that most people refuse to believe? What is one of those truths?
That's easy. That they still think they can change the other person. They do. It doesn't matter how many books have been written about it, how many podcasts they've heard, how many people like me tell them, you cannot change the other person in your relationship.
Man.
You don't have the guile. You don't have the desire. It doesn't happen. You cannot change another person. They can only change themselves.
This is such good information, such a real truth. And I don't know if this is true or not. I know for me, it was true. I had to learn that myself. And I think a lot of people, you have to kind of figure it out, and maybe over and over and over again, you got to figure it out until you're like, oh, that's right. I can't change them. Because I've definitely.
Yeah, people get into relationships. Sometimes it's, the woman wants to change the man. It's like, oh, he loves me so much, he'll just change for me because he wants to be with me. And the man thinks, well, she'll change because she knows that she wants to be with me. And the reality is, people are going to be who they are. They're most likely going to stay who they are until or unless they decide they want to change. Now, you may be part of that, but I cannot change the other person. It does not happen ever.
Yeah, that's really good, man. It's good to hear it too many times. You can't hear that enough times, you know?
Right.
And it's also interesting too, right? Because I've been through this. When somebody does change, if they do change, when they do change, they're not going to change exactly how you want or expect them to.
That's right.
They're going to change the way that they change. So even though you're pushing for somebody to change, and as they start to go through the process of like, oh, wow, this person's actually taking the steps, they're doing the work, the outcome is not going to be exactly how you predicted it to be, and it still might not be what you want.
Yeah, that's right. And this is a very broad generalization. So I wish I had a broom, because it's going to be a sweeping generalization. But here's what I see over and over is that when you get in, especially in married relationships, is the man thinks that the woman will never change. She will always be the one that he fell in love with. She'll look the same. She'll sound the same. And what happens is the woman does change and the man's not ready for it. The woman thinks that the man will change because he's with her. And the fact is, men will not change because of that. And that's the biggest source of tension in married relationships specifically. And what will happen, though, is if someone does change, they have a life event, they lose a job, a relative dies, whatever, something that triggers them to say, oh, man, my life is not how I want it. You're right. That change, that transformation they make, it will be what they want, how they see they need to change. And it may not match up with what their spouse thinks. And that can be another source of tension and division if the people allow it to. Or they can choose to say, wow, my partner, my spouse has changed in a meaningful way. Isn't that great that they're different than the person I married? How much more alive is our marriage now? How much more exciting is this, that this person has changed? This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Some people go with that. Some people go, you're not the person I married, and I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really good information, great advice. And I'm just going to before we move on here, I want to mention, like, for myself, even, right, as I've changed over the years, I have not changed in the ways that I expected to. Like, things have happened to me that I've been surprised by myself. So if I'm surprised by my own change, even though I was intentionally changing, if I'm surprised by it, other people are going to be really surprised by it.
Yeah. They're like, wow, this is not the Rob I knew. You're not the guy I knew from college or high school or wherever they knew you from. And you're thinking, yeah, I don't recognize myself either. You know?
Yeah, it's interesting. Life's interesting like that, and the only way you can really fully understand it is to go through it.
Yeah, exactly.
So before we go any further, I want to welcome everybody to the platform. The Unstuck movement was created to help you break those chains in your life that are holding you back personally and professionally. So when I bring people on the show, it's because they've gone through breakthroughs, which means they've gone through change, they've evolved, and they're here to tell the story. And I love these stories. That's why we have this platform. We're sponsored by the Connected Leaders Academy. Check out connectedleadersacademy.com, and also by the Pro Podcaster Academy. So if you're somebody who is an expert at what you do, you want to be the go-to authority in your field, you want to have a platform that creates massive impact in people's lives, in your industry, in the niche that you love talking about, and you also want to make incredible personal and professional connections, I encourage you to launch your own podcast. I'd love to help you with that. If that's something you want to do, make sure you join our wait list for the Pro Podcaster Academy at robzwentz.com. Today, we have Dr. John Page, a relationship consultant, writer, and ex-minister with a 97% success rate in helping people heal connections. With nearly 30 years of experience, he offers practical, personalized solutions rooted in empathy, listening, and spiritual guidance. As we continue on this conversation, I want to know more about you, John. So who were you and what caused you to change?
I was an advertising writer for a long time. Decided I wanted to go to seminary to learn more about God and the Bible and that kind of stuff. And lo and behold, I became a pastor. I got ordained and worked in professional pastoral ministry for 20 some odd years. If you count the unpaid part, it was nearly 30 years, but did that for 23 years. And toward the end, it felt like I needed to do something else. And so I left guaranteed income, guaranteed job, guaranteed everything. I could have ridden that train all the way to retirement. I decided I needed to do something else. And so I left all of that and went into the marketplace, discovered I had some skills that transferred over, whether that was consulting or writing, strategic management, that kind of thing. And so I decided to use all of that to help people who I would never reach in the church. And I'd reach them with some common sense advice that sometimes they've heard, but they haven't heard it in the way they needed to hear it, with acceptance. Other times they haven't heard it at all. You know, what I thought was common sense or stuff that everybody would know, they didn't know. So it's been exciting and helpful just to see, hey, I've got something that's of use to people. And so I try to use it for that.
Can you give me an example of some of these things that they may not have known, some of the things you really help people with?
A lot of times people have been hurt by religion or so forth. And so I try to present things in a way that shows that they're accepted, that they're not judged, that God actually likes them, right? Some people have gotten this, I don't know, this story, this false narrative that there's a God who's just waiting to slap you on the head and smack you down. And I show them with examples and tangible proof that that is in fact not the case. And it opens the door for them to accept themselves, not so much any sort of conversion thing religiously, but just to accept themselves and the truth, the reality that there's a higher power of God that is actually loving. And that for a lot of people is a game changer for them. They just never have heard that message before. For other people, it has nothing to do with religion at all. It's about, they didn't know that they can take ownership of what they say in a conversation with someone they care about. They think that they just had to respond to whatever the person was saying and they had to accept it. They didn't know that you can say things like, hey, hold on a second, what you said hurt me, and I need you to hear what I'm saying and hear what I'm feeling. They didn't know they're allowed to do that they have permission to do that. And it's, as I watch this unfold for people, it's amazing to see that they realize they have power and confidence they didn't know they had before.
Was that something that you struggled with growing up, that you felt like you didn't have that power and you had to find that, or was that something you always possessed?
I had to discover that. I was a nerd. I was a total geek nerd growing up. I mean, from the 80s, I wish I had a picture. I had the, short up front, massive thing in the back going on. It was, oh my gosh, just Nerdville. Like think of the nerd in the Breakfast Club,
Yeah.
right? The blonde haired kid, Anthony Michael Hall. That
Yeah.
was me. I was the nerd. That's how geeky it was. So very socially awkward, just didn't know how to talk to people at all. And so what I did, I watched other people. I learned from other people. And the more I realized I know how to have a conversation, the more conversations I could have. And then I discovered when I get up in front of people, which usually is this deathly fear for most people, I felt alive.
Mm.
And so when I got in front of people, I was a different person.
Hmm.
I was confident and I could communicate and people would respond. And through that experience of just subjecting myself to this scenario of getting up in front of people and speaking to them, even in high school and into college, before I ever went into ministry, that helped me then grow into myself to say, this is no different than having a conversation with a person. You're just in front of them speaking one to one. Just treat it like that. And that helped me make the shift to be more confident and, well, really comfortable with who I was. I accepted myself.
Yeah, that acceptance is everything.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we need guidance into understanding how to accept ourselves. And
Right.
we need guidance into figuring that part of us out. It's interesting with the whole conversation concept too. You knew you were good at having conversations. What would you say some of the key elements are that made you really good at having great conversations?
I think when I realized that um, as an introvert, I get energy from within. And so if I'm talking with someone, I don't have to expend all the energy in the conversation. I can maybe ask a question or two and then sit back and listen. And what I discovered over time is that a lot of people, they don't have anybody to listen to them.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, they want to talk. They want to share about themselves. They want to be heard. And so if I can just listen to them, I can bring about a good conversation with them. They can learn from me. I can learn from them. So the biggest skill I came across was I'm a good listener. And it sounds so easy, but well, you're just sitting there. No, I'm actively listening to what they're saying, how they're saying it. What's going on in their face, what's going on with their hands. They're talking about, talking about whatever. So I can get to the story behind the story with them. And so that listening skill has probably been the biggest superpower I discovered and then really worked on honing to a great degree. Yeah.
Yeah. It's really counter intuitive, right? That the best communication skill you can possibly have is being able to listen well.
Yeah.
It's
For
one of
sure.
the things that I teach a 6-part course on communication, and it's the 6 attitudes of brilliant communicators. And one of those attitudes is being fresh. And fresh communication is just listening, actually paying attention to somebody, because that's
Yeah.
the opposite of how most of society treats communication, especially when it comes to social media and all the text conversations that we have. It's just yelling at people, telling them what you think, and then not paying attention to whatever they said.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
waiting, and you listen long enough until you get a chance to speak about what you want to say, right? It's,
Yeah. Yeah. People think listening is I'm going to listen to this person talk and then I'm going to really tell them, and they've missed the whole thing. Listening is not waiting. Listening is listening.
mm-hmm.
I know that sounds very just simple, but listening to another person isn't waiting your turn. Listening is turning off yourself and turning completely on to the other person so that you are in their world with them.
Mm-hmm.
Everything from what they're saying to their tone to how they're saying it, And that'll allow you then to respond accordingly. Otherwise, you're just going to miss it.
It sounds simple. It can be very difficult to do. And I think when we were talking about relationships today, and people were like, when are you going to talk about relationships? Well, this is all about relationships, because the reason your relationship might be struggling, whatever that relationship is because you might not be listening well enough. Good chance you're not listening well enough, right?
For sure.
Especially the longer you know somebody, you think the less you have to listen because you already know.
Yes, like, oh, we're talking about subject A. Well, we always talk about subject A in this way. This is going to be the same conversation we've had for the last 5 years about subject A.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that's true. A lot of times it's actually not. But if I think that about the person I'm talking with, that I've had this conversation with for years, i.e., your spouse, right? Then it will go the same way. But maybe it won't if you just think, we're going to talk about subject A. What do they have to say about it today? And then maybe I could ask a question about this subject that maybe we can take this conversation in a new direction. That might be helpful. I mean, there's two key principles I've come across that can help people have really good conversations, especially in really long-term relationships, whether that's a married relationship or your very, 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 very best bestie. Two key principles. Would you like to know what they are?
I would love to.
All right, here we go. They're broken down in basically two kind of conversations. Are we having a fix-it conversation? Are we having a feeling conversation? Usually it looks like this. Pretend, here's a scenario. We have a married couple and spouse A comes in and says, there's been a problem with the sink and I'm not really sure how I feel about it. And spouse B will come in and say, well, to fix the sink, you need to do such and such and such and such. Well, what would be really key in that conversation right there is for spouse A to say, I've got a problem with the sink. I don't want you to tell me how to fix it. I need you to hear me tell you how I feel about the situation, because it's really not about the sink, right? Or for spouse B to say, is this a you want me to fix it conversation, or is this you want me to listen so you can tell me how you feel conversation? And if you would do that in a relationship, one, you'd have a clear conversation, and you'd have less conversations end in arguments of, oh my gosh, he didn't hear what I was saying. That's exactly right. Because when you're talking about a fix-it, a pragmatic, logical kind of thing, you're using one part of your brain. If you're having a conversation about feelings, about how I feel about a situation, you're using a completely separate other part of your brain. And so if the two spouses are in this section, they are in fact speaking completely different languages and will not understand each other.
Yeah, it's really true. This just happened yesterday to me. It actually happened in a really good way because I just had an off day, and my wife and I went on a walk, and she could tell something was wrong, so she just kind of asked me questions, and she stopped and she said to me, "Do you want me to try to help you figure this out, or do you just want to talk about it?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I don't need to figure it out. I'm just having a moment." So I guess I just need to talk about it. So
there we go.
That clarified for her right away. Okay, I just need to listen to him for a couple.
Yeah, that's a smart wife you got right there, Rob.
Well,
she's smart.
She's a counselor, so she's
See, that's perfect. Perfect. Yeah. Okay, for all those couples who are not married to a counselor, right? This will be helpful. Do you want me to figure it out? You want me to fix it, or is this a feeling based? If you just want me to listen so you can rant or cry or whatever it is you need, then I'll listen and we'll keep it at the feeling thing. And I won't shift gears into, let me help you figure this out and I've got a solution to your problem. But if that's what you need, then just say so. It's like, hey, I've got a problem with something. Can you help me figure it out? Oh man, that'll be the most productive conversation you have all day, right?
Yeah,
it's just about clarifying and being clear about what do I want? What do we want as a couple from this conversation. And it sounds like, well, why should we do that? We've been married for 5 years, 12 years, 23 years, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Well, because it's about loving and caring for the other person enough to say, I still care enough about you so that we can be clear in this and we have a good, productive conversation. Because communication, especially with couples, is where the real bonding and growth occurs. Why would you not want that to be the best you could be?
Absolutely, 100%. And I'm curious what your answer will be to this, because if somebody, if you're with your spouse or somebody close to you, and they do want you to just listen, it can be really difficult if you're not prepared. This is true for me. If I'm not prepared to just listen, and like I'm not in that mindset,
yeah,
it can be really hard for me to shut off the mental chatter to really pay attention. It might be a little bit of ADHD. It might just be I'm not in that mindset right now. So I'm curious. And right now, we're going to jump into 1 minute to shout out the sponsor of the show. When we come back, though, I want to know what you would say to this. How do you prepare yourself and shut off that mental chatter to prepare to really listen to somebody? And we'll talk about that in 1 minute. Are you struggling to make consistent, valuable content for yourself? Do you want to have an efficient and effective way to create content that attracts the people that you want to connect with in life, the people you want to build relationships with in business? Do you want to be the go-to authority at what you do, at what you're great at? Would it be helpful for you if you had a platform that connects you to incredible people in your industry? The kind of platform that gets you leads and lands you clients without you having to beat down anybody's door or blow up anybody's inbox. Whether you're already creating content or you're desiring to start and it's something that's been kind of burning inside of you for a while, I urge you and encourage you to check out the Pro Podcaster Academy. Get started right now. Join the waitlist at robzwentz.com.
Hi, my name is Jose Escobar, and I'm the founder and CEO of the Connected Leaders Academy. We're a growing tribe, a community of entrepreneurs all over the world globally. If you're an entrepreneur and you're looking to grow personally and professionally, scale your influence, develop your skill sets, move the needle in your business, more clients, more money, more profit, the bottom line, and of course, grow your circle and your network like never before, join the Connected Leaders Academy today. Check me out on Instagram and on Facebook, the @ JAESCO25. We look forward to having you join us. Take care.
John, this is a really important and powerful conversation, so I'm glad we're talking about it. What do we do when we know we need to listen, but we can't shut off that mental chatter? What do you do?
Yeah, if it's a situation where, let's say my spouse comes to me and say, hey, I've got this going on. I really need you to listen to me. This is really important. And I'm in the middle of most likely a task. I'm reading something. I'm on my computer. I'm doing something task oriented. So I'm not in my head, really. I'm not in my heart. I'm on the task. What I have found helpful, and this has been learned from years of not doing this, and we got into big arguments. So learning from mistakes, right? The first time this would happen, I'm like, I don't have time for that right now. Not a great thing to say when someone's coming to you with a really feeling-based conversation they need, right? So over time, I learn from my mistakes. I'll say, hey, sweetheart, I do want to be there for you. Can you give me about 5 minutes to kind of shift gears here, so I can be there 100% for you? I don't want to be distracted, and my mind is still over here. So give me a few minutes, and I would love to sit down and listen to you and let you tell me whatever it is you need to tell me. And so that works in the sense of it tells the other person, one, you're important to me. I do want to help you. And third, I'm not in a space mind-wise or time-wise that I can be 100% there for you, but I want to be. Can you give me a little time and space so I can get into that time with you? And usually that will be fine. Like most people are like, okay, cool. They're going to be there for me. If you just shut it off quickly, it's not going to end well. And so it's just a matter of letting the other person know, I want to be there for you. Give me a sec to kind of get there. Right.
Yeah. And that's what I love. These things are simple, but they're not easy. because
No.
you have to be prepared for them in the moment, which takes a lot of practice to be there for it in the moment. And same here, man. My wife often in the morning when she wakes up, she has a lot of things she wants to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
There you go.
when I wake up, I don't have anything I want to say. And I don't even want
Yeah.
to think necessarily. It takes my brain a little bit, maybe 15, 20 minutes to like gear up. It's like starting the engine in a car in the winter. You got to let it warm up for a minute.
Right. Right.
And so I've made the mistake plenty of times of being rude, I guess. I was just short, not meaning to be rude, but just being short. And she's been upset by that. And that'll carry on, for a while, that we'll be at odds, and I'm trying to figure it out. And so what I realized was what you just said. I'll say, babe, listen, I would love to talk about this. I'm not fully awake yet. Just give me 15 minutes, please. Let me get a shower and we can talk about whatever you want, but I can't do it right now.
Yeah.
And that usually works pretty well. Sometimes it can still be like I really needed to talk about this. Yeah. But if I give that bit of information, it creates the space where she knows I'm not just totally ignoring what she's saying. I'm not rejecting any of it. I'm just not prepared for it.
Right. And, unless it's just a knockdown emergency thing, which most conversations like that are not, couples will develop a shorthand of, babe, after coffee, I'm there for you. Not before coffee. I can't be. Right. And so the longer people are married or in a long-term relationship, they can kind of develop a shorthand to say, hey, I need to talk to you after coffee. I'll hit you back up. Okay. Because they've learned over time, I know he'll be there for me. I know he's got to have his coffee first.
Yeah.
Deal. So as long as couples can have that openness and understanding, that'll work. But if there's a long history of wanting to talk about something important and the other person brushing them off, they'll stop coming to you to talk about something important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's the beginning of the end of the relationship.
Yes, absolutely. And that's a very dangerous place to be in. And so being available and as kind of like backtracking on this episode a little bit, you go back into that same conversation you've had with that same person 100 times. And you're like, here we go again. So when that conversation comes up, your brain automatically goes to, well, I know where this ends up because you've done it 1,000 times, right?
Right. Yep.
Just like anything good or bad in your life, if you have habits, you know where the habits are going to end up. You know what you usually do. How do you break that pattern? So you keep repeating the same pattern. And I like to think of this like this can be with the person you're with, but it also, most importantly, is with you and yourself, because you'll have the same conversations with yourself over and over again and not even realize it and come to the same conclusions. And you're completely unaware of this happening. What do you recommend to put in the stopgap in those places? I imagine you're going to say, ask a question, because that's where my mind goes to. What do you say in those situations?
It goes a little deeper in that, in the sense of it is ask a question, but it's ask the question of yourself of, do I really want anything to change in this relationship? Do I want this conversation to change at all? Or have I already made up my mind about this other person that it doesn't matter what we're going to talk about in this particular subject? I just don't want to help the other person. Because if I wanted to help the other person in this conversation that keeps coming back up, there's a reason why it keeps coming back up, because it hasn't gotten addressed. Mm-hmm. Perhaps it hasn't gotten addressed because I have not changed how I get into that conversation about this thing we've talked about 100 times. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's coming back up because I'm the person in that person's life that needs to say, we tend to talk about this in the same way all the time. What if we talked about it in a different way? That is never going to happen if I don't take ownership of, do I really care about this person enough to change this conversation or not? Or I'm just going to just sit here and twiddle my thumbs mentally while they talk about whatever, because I honestly, really deep down, I don't really care about what they're talking about. That's why it keeps happening, and that's why the conversation stays the same over and over again.
That's really good. What about when it's yourself, talking to yourself, and you're having the same conversation over and over again with yourself, which we all do. We all have these things that are unconscious that we repeat a billion times, even though we don't want to. Would you give the same answer in that situation?
You'd have to realize, it's like, wow, why am I still having this conversation with my inner critic, or whatever you want to call it, over and over again? Why am I still having the same thoughts about this scenario for years and years? It takes a little bit of awareness to say, I've noticed a pattern. Why am I having this pattern? Do I want this pattern to change? So yeah, you're going to have to ask some questions of yourself if you notice the pattern. Some people don't grasp it. They just think this way about this subject, and that's just how they're supposed to think about it. They don't know that they can reframe it and think about it in a new way and achieve breakthrough and transformation and change and all the things they would want. They just think that's just how they're wired. It's how I am. I always get upset about such and such. That's just how I am. It's how I'm wired. It's part of my DNA. Well, maybe, but it doesn't have to stay that way.
Yeah.
So some of it's just some self-awareness, self-realization. That's hard to fix if you don't have it.
That's really good and really true. You know, I'm going to go back to the start of this conversation because this was my situation. My ex-wife, she was always telling me that I needed to change, which I did. I did need to change because I was kind of a wreck, and I wouldn't listen. And then when I finally started to listen, I think for her it was almost too late, you know? And as I started to change, I didn't change in the ways I don't think that she expected me to change. But she had encouraged me to change. So you find yourself in this loop, right? And then as I started to change, I started to question all of these things about myself. So you're right. It's like, and sometimes it's really powerful. I think, especially if you have somebody in your life who's challenging you to change, what do you do with that? Now I'm kind of just like, I was asking myself, like, okay, so if she wants me to change, I need to change. I don't know how to change because I didn't, like you just said, I didn't think that I could. I thought the way that I thought was the way that I thought, and that was it. Yeah. And it was really interesting looking back on myself. And this was, maybe 15 years ago. 15 years ago, I started realizing, oh, wow, I actually can change. I didn't even know that I was able to. And I think that's a great thing for people to realize is, like, if you don't think you can change, that is the biggest limiting belief. And maybe nobody's ever challenged you to change. So I wanted to say all of that to lead to, I'm really curious about yourself. You had a job, went into seminary, became a minister, and then left that to go back into the workplace. Those are some massive changes that most people never make. So when you decided to leave a job and go into seminary, what sparked that change for you? Because I mean, I love God. I'm a man of faith, but I've never felt compelled to go into seminary. What caused that to happen?
Yeah, it was a hunger to know more. I was always a good student, learn a lot, get good grades, all that stuff. And so it was a very, I don't know, almost pragmatic connection for me of, I was in a season of life, I was really learning about God and getting into what the Bible said and didn't say and what it meant and what it didn't mean and so forth. And so in my just logical mind, I'm thinking, oh, well, if I want to learn more about God and the Bible and theology and this kind of stuff, well, I'll just go to seminary, right? I mean, if I was really into the law and legal stuff, well, I'll just go to law school, learn more about the law. Had nothing to do with, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I just wanted to learn about legal stuff. That's what it would have been. Well, same thing for seminary. I went to seminary thinking, I'm not going to be a pastor. I mean, I'm not going to go into ministry or anything. I just want to learn more. So seminary, clearly, that's the place. That's the place to learn all you can learn about it, right? Which that was how my logical, pragmatic mind was working. But to use my other example, that's like saying, oh, I'm going to go to law school. I'm never going to be a lawyer. Well, then why are you going? I mean,
Yeah.
really, come on.
That's
That's
interesting though, because
that's where it started. Was I just wanted to learn more. That was it.
and you can't predict the change that's going to come from that. You couldn't
No.
predict that change, and I love that because you don't know. It's like that. I say this all the time, but God calls us to a life of adventure, and that adventure means I don't know where this is going to take me, but I know I'm supposed to do it.
Exactly.
And I love that. It makes life so much fun. So
Yeah.
the other end of that, like fast forward some 30 years later, and you decide to leave ministry. That had to have been a massive change. What caused that to happen?
Yeah. Let's see. How much time do we have, Rob?
We don't have much left, so let's scrape the surface.
I'll give you a short version. The ministry that I had been engaged in, it wasn't doing it for me anymore. It had become something that I didn't want to be a part of. A lot of reasons for that, too much really to go into here. It was just very obvious. If I kept doing what I was doing, being the public face of this ministry and this kind of stuff, it was going to hurt me. It was going to do harm to me. It wasn't going to be good for my emotional health, mental health, spiritual health. And so it was just time of, I got to get out. I need to do something else. This is not it. And once I had come to that conclusion, and it took a while, but once I came to that conclusion, it was automatic and I had peace about it. There was no looking back. I walked away from the whole thing and said, best decision I've made in my life. And I've never had any doubt about it since. And that's how I knew. That's how I knew it was the right decision, was that fairly instantaneous sense of peace about it, that this is not good for me anymore. I need to do something else.
And I think it's really good advice to hear, because you said it took a while, right? When we see somebody change,
5 years to get to that point. Yeah.
When we see somebody change on the surface, it seems like, oh, that person just all of a sudden decided to do something different. But internally, when change happens, for most people, it is a long internal process until the outward thing actually happens. Yeah. And I guess as we come to the conclusion of this, the reason I was asking that was I wanted to know, like, that takes a lot of courage to do that, I would imagine, for yourself, to step away from something that's such an identity to change after all those years. It had to have taken a lot of courage to get out of that place. What advice would you give to somebody who knows they need to make a massive change, but it seems so daunting that they never do it?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it took like 5 years to get there. So it was a building up of the courage, right? It wasn't a knee-jerk reaction. And so if someone is in that place where they are is they know that is not where they need to be, start making some little steps, check out what's beyond. Like maybe they have an idea of where they do want to be. We'll kind of explore it. Try something on the side, before you give up your job that covers, 80% of your household income. Try some side gigs for a while. See if that is what it is you think it's supposed to be. Right? You're working in sales, but you want to work in engineering. Well, test it out before you just throw everything away and make the leap, so that you do the change in a way that won't be traumatic. Yeah. That by the time you're ready to make that leap, it's not really a leap. It's really just a simple step, because you've built up the confidence to take this step, really. Yeah,
I think that's the best advice, is to take the small steps, baby steps to getting yourself to where you're trying to go. But I wanted to bring that up because that had to have been a giant change, and there had to have been so many stages to that, and so much questioning for yourself. Yeah. So I think anybody in life, because we all hit places where we know we're supposed to do something different, we're supposed to make a shift, and we don't do it, and that can be very detrimental for the rest of our life, because when you know that something's supposed to change and you resist it, so much stuff comes along with that resistance that can be really unhealthy for you and the people around you.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. The people around me. My wife knew I was supposed to leave before I did. I mean, she had already kind of made the exit in her mind. She was just waiting for me to catch up, right?
Oh, wow.
But had I continued to stay, it would have caused major problems in our marriage. Because after I left and we talked through it all, she was very open about it. It's like, if you had stayed, we would have been in trouble.
Wow.
It was that toxic of a situation. And so, I'm glad I did, and we're in good shape. So that's good.
Good.
You're right. Our decisions about what we want to change or not change, it does affect other people. We've got to remember that it's not just me. There's some others are going to be affected by the wave that comes along.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
This has been a really powerful conversation. I really value your time and sharing with us today, because these things need to be talked about. And it's great to, people it's the point of the podcast, the breakthrough, true testimonies. You have a testimony of going through these changes and the mistakes you've made and learning from those mistakes. And, in life, I think we do have to make some mistakes on our own, but we also can learn from other people to help fast track that process. If people want to contact you and they want to find out more about you and get a session with you to learn more, that you can set up a free Are We a Good Fit call with yourself. They can do that via LinkedIn. Just search Dr. John Page, look for your face. And what would you guidance into that conversation? What should they be prepared for or come to the conversation with?
Are they ready to make a change in their life? Whatever it is we're going to talk about, I can't want it more than you do. I can't convince you. I can't use fancy words or common words or practical words. If you don't want it for yourself, I can't make you want it. You've got to want it for yourself. If you do, then I can help you. I can help you keep going. But I can't want it more than you do.
You can't change anybody who's not willing to change. That's
exactly right. Yeah.
That's it. So make sure you search for Dr. John Page on LinkedIn, send him a connection and make that happen. If you want to be the go-to authority in your space and you want to launch your podcast, I'd love to help you with that. You can join the wait list at robzwentz.com. Once again, like I said, awesome having you on here, John. Thank you for your wisdom. Anything you want to share with the audience before we sign off?
Just a pleasure talking with you, Rob. And if they're ready for change, I'm ready to help them make the change.
Cool. Another true testimony of breakthrough. Until next time, and this has been the Unstuck Movement.